Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 250 of the All Dolphins podcast. It's
250 episodes with
there you
Alan
go,
Poupard. Ain't that something?
right there. Right? I thought we were doing Bobblehead Tuesday
Oh,
here. No? Okay. Tuesday, March 19th, 2024. We are about a week into the start of the new league year when trades are allowed to be official, when the signings are official. Dolphins had not made any moves on this particular day as we're taping. No even official announcement. They've made every move official up to this point, except for the re-signing of Braxton Berrios. Everything else has been made official. So everything you've seen reported, including, and we've had a Zoom media session with every newcomer. Today was Anthony Walker Jr.'s turn, the linebacker coming over from the Cleveland Browns. The news involving the Dolphins today revolves around contract restructures again, and Omar's favorite two words of 2024, void years.
we'll get into that, but don't you have a history lesson to give these people?
Oh, I do. See, thank you for reminding me.
Yes.
So today's episode 250. If we take the last two numbers there, 50th overall, since we're doing draft pick related to the number, Dolphins have never made a selection 50th overall. They have selected three players 250th overall. Guys were picked in the seventh round, including probably the most productive one was linebacker Mark Brown out of Purdue in 1983, who was a starter for a few years, wore number 54, I want to say. Solid player, not Pro Bowl type, but he was a solid player. And as I said, he started for a couple of years. The last one was in 2013, and that was defensive back Don Jones from Arkansas State, who had a cup of coffee with the Dolphins, went to New England, came back to the Dolphins, and was a very good special teams player.
I think he played for the Cleveland Browns as well. I know Don had a respectable NFL career for a seventh round pick. Props to him. I know he's a like a rancher or farmer in Alabama. He's got land, got property. He's done well for himself. So props to Don Jones.
Don Jones, Arkansas State. Here, let me look at his football resume. Oh, yeah, he did Miami, New England, Miami, Cleveland, New Orleans, Cleveland, Houston. Spent 4 seasons in the NFL, 56 games, 0 starts.
Mostly a special teams core guy, and there's no shame in that. If you told me my seventh round pick is going to be a special teams career guy, I would take it every single time.
Correct. And Walt Aikens had himself like a decent little career as a special teams guy. So, again, nothing wrong with that. So, again, back to Omar's two favorite words. You're not escaping your two favorite words. Void years. Bradley Chubb and Jeff Wilson Jr., the latest two who have had their contracts tweaked.
Nobody cares about void years until they start to say, oh, man, why do we have so much dead money? Why do we have so much dead cap? Void years has become the new in vogue thing for teams to do to skirt the cap when they're financially irresponsible. They just start to tack on these void years and act like they don't have to pay the bill eventually. But ultimately, I'm not worried about it because the Dolphins' entire roster in 2025 right now is full of players on team option years. So the only thing that I do concern myself with is by restructuring Bradley Chubb's contract and restructuring Teron Armstead's contract and restructuring Jeff Wilson's contract, they created about $22 million in cap space this year, which is, it's pretty cool, especially when you need to use it. But what does it do for your future commitment to the cap for guys like Bradley Chubb? That's why I was kind of resistant to restructuring him. One, because he was coming off a basically a career challenging ACL injury. Now, hopefully it's not challenging, but then look at Connor Williams. You never know. And your commitment was done to him after the 2024 season. Now I got to look at the details of the contract when the restructuring is officially reported and see exactly how it plays out in 2025 regarding Bradley Chubb and your commitment to him.
There's no guaranteed money. I can tell you that. Because I have seen it. And here's the thing, for those not familiar, The restructuring basically involves turning the base salary, which like 13 million of it, into a signing bonus, which is then prorated over the next 4 or 5 years, including a couple of years that are void years that will include strictly that prorated portion of the signing bonus and the player, and that will count against the cap, even though the player no longer will be on the roster. So that's what the Dolphins have done.
And then when people like Alan Papard want to cry about, oh, dead money, even though dead money doesn't go to anybody. It's not like
it doesn't, because they're paid their signing bonus now. What it does, I hate it when you do this. It takes away from the amount of cap space that you would have that year. For example, Byron Jones is a perfect example. Dolphins are not paying him 10 million this year. They already paid him that 10 million, but it's 10 million of cap space that they don't have because that's the final prorated version of what they owe him. That's what that is.
And it's $10 million you can spend less this year as opposed to putting it into 2 players, because that's pretty much what $10 million can 2 really good players in cap space could have done. And you want to complain about $28 million in dead cap now. Okay, well, I don't want to hear you complaining about it in 2025 or 2026 or 2027 when there's dead cap for voided year contracts.
And there will be a lot of those, but then this is what they're doing is they're sacrificing some cap space down the line to create cap space now. That's what that is. Okay.
And I understand it. I understand what they're doing. I just don't necessarily think it's financially healthy. However, I understand that they're in a win now mode. And that leads me to the piece that I just wrote for alldolphins.com, which you can find.
Nice segue. This is for the segue.
Yes, that you can find right there. I spent pretty much all day kind of analyzing and breaking down who'd you lose and who is their possible replacements right now heading into the draft. You can find that on alldolphins.com, where you can find everything. The work is for free. No paywall, no subscriptions, no monthly charges. It's for free. And the point that I was making in this piece is you have filled in your roster by replacing players who left and got compensated more handsomely than you were willing to pay them. Christian Wilkins, 4 years, $110 million, $57.5 million being fully guaranteed. Miami was not going to pay that, okay? That is a ridiculous price for Christian Wilkins, who's a very nice player. But here's my issue, and this is probably the clearest example that you didn't upgrade everywhere. You basically signed Jonathan Harris, Neville Gallimore, Isaiah Mack, Devion Nixon, and I'll throw in there just so Alan Poupard becomes more comfortable with it, Benito Jones, who I basically pegged as a replacement for Raekwon Davis at nose tackle. All of those players added collectively for their little minimum base contracts, in my opinion, they do not add up to what you lose in Christian Wilkins. And there's no way that you can argue, justify that they do. Now, what I will say is there are other positions where I think you clearly upgraded. And we're going to go through this player by player, replacement by replacement, and give you an upgrade or a downgrade. Premature, super premature, because you never know.
It's a preliminary, correct. It's a preliminary verdict.
Preliminary verdict. Right now, we start out with Christian Wilkins, who I just told you, named you all the bodies that are added there to defensive tackles. I feel a little sorry for Zach Sealer because he's going to have to figure out how to play with one of these guys, if not 2 of them. Obviously, Alan Poupard, you're not going to say that's an upgrade, right?
Well, that's kind of a duh. And this is where actually there was a discussion on Twitter about people taking objection to you having used the term apocalypse to describe this offseason. Well, let's be realistic. If it wasn't for the Dolphins' very tight cap situation, whether you want to call it apocalypse or not, Dolphins probably would have franchise tagged Christian Wilkins, unless there was some sort of agreement that they were not going to do that. Yes. Otherwise, you don't let him walk. You don't let him walk if you can have him for $22 million for this season, particularly if you're in all-in mode. I mean, that's point blank, zero doubt about it.
Now, I mean, they put a franchise tag on Randy Starks and Paul Soliai, who were both inferior players to Christian Wilkins. They would have and should have, if they were in position to put it on Christian, they would have done it.
Correct. but this is where the lack of cap flexibility. But no, obviously that's the biggest loss of the offseason. And this is where also you and I are both confident, but you and I both really like Zach Sealer. We're both very confident he's going to be good again in 2024. But the reality is he's not going to have Christian Wilkins next to him.
Mm-hmm.
And Christian Wilkins, while he's no, and I was on a podcast with my good buddy Hondo was ready to put him, Hondo Carpenter was ready to put him in a class with Chris Jones and Aaron Donald. I was like, whoa, simmer down now, simmer down. But he is a good player, and he's a very
good player. Very good player. I'm not going to be disrespectful, Christian. He's a very good player. Is he a Pro Bowl player? Last year, maybe.
His play was absolutely Pro Bowl level last year. He didn't get it, but there are a lot of really good defensive tackles in the AFC.
Should have got it over Quentin Williams. Statistically, he had a better year. His defense was better.
Again, we are fixated on stats. Okay. Well, let's. You know what? When we have on
ring counting, brother, just own it. That's what I do.
No, what?
Stats and ring counting. That's what I do.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. By the way, I loved in our discussion about who's the greatest tight end of all time, and you came up with rings. Somebody pointed out Randy Grossman of the 1970s Pittsburgh Steelers having 4 Super Bowl rings. So therefore, he's the greatest Super Bowl tight end of all time.
Only rings. I don't even know who Randy Grossman is.
That's correct. But that proves anyway. We're going to have our good friend Antoine Staley from New York Daily News on the podcast later this week. Let's ask him to debate Quentin Williams versus Christian Wilkins as far as and again, this is not a shot at Christian. He's very good, but you keep dumping on Quentin Williams, who is a stud.
He is. Okay, but he's now getting paid less than Christian Wilkins. All right, let's get to our next position, which is offensive guard Robert Hunt, who got a wonderful 5-year, $100 million deal, $44 million of it being guaranteed, which really means it's only a 3-year deal for $44 million. His possible replacements, in my mind, are Liam Eichenberg and Robert Jones. And I know you'll get your panties in a bunch because you think that Jake Driscoll is going to be a guard and a right guard. And I will argue to you he's going to have to stay at right tackle because you don't have another right tackle. So you don't have another, unless you're counting Keon Smith, you don't have a quality swing tackle because of the potential loss of Kendall Lamb, who has not been re-signed. So obviously, let's look at this from a Liam Eichenberg, Robert Jones, and then we can even factor in Isaiah Wynn because I think that's a push with him being re-signed. He's kind of projected as a starting left guard because he played pretty well at that position last year. Do you look at Robert Hunt being replaced by Liam Eichenberg or Robert Jones, upgrade or downgrade?
How do you know I wear panties, by the way? Sorry. Okay. I digress. Jesus. Yes, I'm going to include Jack Driscoll in the equation. I'm not going to include Isaiah Wynn because Isaiah Wynn's going to start at left guard. And by the way, yes, to our eyes, he looked pretty good. Again, if you're going to use Pro Football Focus to highlight when they have high grades on Dolphin players, they had really low grade on Isaiah Wynn last year. They had him like really way down among guards. So that aside, he's going to start at left guard more than likely, in my opinion. At right guard, obviously it's a downgrade. Robert Hunt's better than either Robert Jones, Liam Eichenberg, or Jack Driscoll. Again, but he's gonna bitch at the Dolphins for not having paid the contract he got in Carolina, which is a little crazy. And which to me, regardless of their cap status, they wouldn't have matched because that's.
I will say this, and this will be a controversial statement, which comes from me quite often. I think Liam Eichenberg's best game that he played in the NFL was at right guard last year.
How was that controversial?
Because people were like, oh, no, there's no way that Liam Eichenberg could be our starting right guard. And I'm telling you, he probably could be your starting right guard. We know this coaching staff loves Liam Eichenberg. Despite all of his shortcomings and all of his issues and all of his struggles and all of his problems, they want to invest in Liam Eichenberg. They have not pulled the plug on that. And I think that when I saw him at right guard, I knew instantly, yeah, that's his position, and they're probably going to let Robert Hunt walk because I knew they weren't going to pay Robert Hunt $10 to $12 million a year to play a position where you can really fill it with a $2 million player.
he can fill it in as well. I don't think the decision to let Robert Hunt walk had anything to do with, well, we got Liam, we're good. It had to do with, man, this guy's getting crazy money. Sorry, Robert, love you, buddy, but enjoy.
Yeah. Robert made 44 over 3 years, so he's basically at 14.6 million a season, which is okay. A little high, a little steep for my price, but I wish him the best. I will always be a fan. I will follow Robert at Carolina. Let's move on to our next guy, which is Connor Williams being replaced by Aaron Brewer. Now, this is a little bit unfair. I'm going to have to say that it's an upgrade just from this standpoint. While Connor Williams is probably viewed as the #1 center free agent out there on the market, there is questions, concerns, doubts, complications, or whether or not he's going to continue his playing career. And I think until we hear from him, it's a little premature to say what he's going to do. But you are one of the first individuals that I heard mention that, hey, it might be a career for Connor Williams. Now, I don't know what kind of complications he could be having, but the talk is that he might not be playing in the NFL in 2024, if not much further.
Yeah, here's the thing, though. If we're going to look at it now, yeah, Aaron Brewer is a better option than Connor Williams the way he stands. If we're going to look at peak Aaron Brewer and peak Connor Williams, I think Connor Williams is a slightly better player. Again, if you want to believe the PFF grades, Connor Williams is a #2 center in the NFL last year, and Aaron Brewer was 11, which isn't bad at all, but there's still a difference.
And I don't believe PFF grades.
No, correct. We use it like everybody else when it suits our purposes and helps our point.
I have never used the grades ever since 2013, but carry on.
I'll throw it in the story where I don't have stats to back up the point I'm trying to make. Because if it's just, this is what I observed, this is what I see, people are going like, what the hell do you know?
What the hell do people in Pro Football Focus know? But anyway.
Well, supposedly they're all former scouts or GMs or coaches. No? Okay. Anyway, but here's the thing. Given the situation with Connor Williams, which unrelated to Aaron Brewer, getting Brewer to replace him is a really good move. So I can't say it's an upgrade over last year, but it's a really good replacement.
Mm-hmm. That's probably the first position that I would say it was a clear upgrade, and primarily because even if it wasn't Connor Williams, it would be Liam Eichenberg or Aaron Brewer, and I think Aaron Brewer would be a better upgrade at center, a better performer at center than Liam Eichenberg at center. But let's move on to our next position, which is the inside linebacker spot. The Dolphins let go of Jerome Baker to clear $9.8 million in cap space. I believe he signed a 1-year deal that could be worth up to $7 million with the Seattle Seahawks. And his replacements are former Seahawk linebacker Jordy Brooks and Cleveland Browns starter Anthony Walker. Now, what intrigues me about that is the fact that there's 2 for 1, and both are proven established NFL starters. Obviously, Anthony Brooks signed a 1-year, very minimum base contract with, I believe, $400,000 in guaranteed money.
Walker, you mean?
What do you say?
Walker signed a 1-year contract.
Walker, yes.
Yep.
Brooks signed a Big Daddy deal. Brooks signed, I believe it was 3 years, 30, as could be paying as much as $30 million. But when you look at the details of that contract, it's really a 3-year, $26.2 million contract, and only $9.5 million of it was fully guaranteed. So that, to me, that makes next year really an option year for the team. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to cut him, but more than likely he's going to be here next year for $7.8 million. Oh, actually, $6.5 million of that contract is guaranteed in 2025. So it's really a 2-year deal.
He's not going anywhere next year.
Yeah, it's really a 2-year deal. I might correct myself. He's one of the only players in this free agent class that has guaranteed money that carries into 2025, which is a very telling sign for me. And we'll get into that a little bit later. You say this is a upgrade or downgrade at inside linebacker?
Well, starting with the fact it's a 2-for-1, that's a clear upgrade. Number one, and I've said before, I like Brooks's upside, where I think he's going to wind up being a better player than Jerome Baker was. And then you tack on Walker, who's a good player, has battled injuries the last couple of years, but he's a good player. And it gives you better depth there. Now you have those two with David Long Jr. If the Dolphins do decide to keep Duke Riley, now you have 4 serviceable guys, and that leaves, sorry, but Channing Tindall is kind of.
I actually thought about this because I've seen Channing Tindall, and I know Vic Fangio basically poo-pooed it, but I've seen Channing Tindall with the athleticism to be a pass rusher, and I think that could be a better home for him potentially than what he's doing now, which is inside linebacker. They're just are not instincts at inside linebacker for him, and at this point, I would think that he would do anything to try to make an NFL roster, and they can certainly use some help at edge player, outside linebacker. So to me, I definitely see that as a possibility for him, because Lord knows it ain't working right what he's doing right now.
Not so far. No, I have no issue with that. That makes sense. Channing, you see the quarterback, go get him.
Yeah, basically, yes. Let's move on to our next position, which is outside linebacker, which we know is a spot that you definitely need help because of Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb's injuries, which were all suffered late in the season. I believe Jalen Phillips tore his Achilles in November, at the end of November, and had it repaired early December. Bradley Chubb tore his ACL in December, and I believe he had surgery at the beginning of January. So we're talking, at the best case scenario for both players, a 9-month rehabilitation process, which gets them to August, September to begin actually practicing. And then more than likely, they're going to begin the season on a PUP and see where it goes from there. But Dolphins also lost Andrew Van Ginkel. 2 years, $20 million deal, really $10 million. It's really a 1-year, $10 million deal to the Minnesota Vikings. They replaced him with Shaq Barrett from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers last year, 52 tackles, 4.5 sacks, 3 forced fumbles. This was a guy who was a Pro Bowler at one time, guy who led the NFL in sacks. Where are you, Alan Poupard? Upgrade or downgrade?
Okay, a couple of things here, and this is where I'm glad that we have the AllDolphins.com banner at the bottom, because I wrote about Shaquille Barrett yesterday and today in a combo piece with Jordan Poyer. Shaq Barrett was himself returning from an Achilles injury last year, sustained halfway through the 2022 season. Came back. He did start 16 games at 4.5 sacks. That was his worst sacks to starts ratio of his career. And he basically said he knew it was coming, that he was going to get released because the production wasn't there and he was carrying a big salary or a big cap number. And he's 31, 32 years old. And to me, I don't know that you can, it's a projection and a hope and optimism that he rediscovers the pre-Achilles injury form. He had 3 sacks in his 8 games in 2022.
4.5 in 16 games last year. But do you realize that in his career, he's only had 2 seasons where he's had double-digit sacks? 19.5 in 2019 when he got his massive deal, was a Defensive Player of the Year candidate, and then 10 sacks in their 2021 championship run for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So every single year since then, he's been in the 5s, 4s, and then there was one season in 2020 when he had 8 sacks. But this is a guy who's going to probably play 600 to 800 snaps as a rotational pass rusher, especially when Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb get it back going. You still haven't answered the question. I need a conviction from you. Upgrade, downgrade, Alan Poupard.
Oh, it's a slight downgrade. I think in a best case scenario, Barrett rediscovers his old form and gives you all you could have expected from Andrew Van Ginkel. But I think that might be a little bit wishful thinking if we're going to be realistic about it. But again, this is another case where the money that Minnesota gave Andrew Van Ginkel was too rich for the Dolphins' taste. And this is also another place where maybe if the Dolphins had more cap flexibility going in, maybe they make a competitive offer. Van Ginkel, like in South Florida, he is, however, from the Midwest. I think he went to college. I don't know exactly. I forget what state. I think he might be from Iowa, but he's going back there. That's where the roots are. That also has.
I think he's from Minnesota. I think he's from Minnesota because I remember him telling me he grew up rooting for Adrian Peterson. And on 1st and 10, you got to watch the Andrew Van Ginkel 1st and 10.
Born in Rock Valley, Iowa. Sorry.
Rock Valley, Iowa, but I think he grew up in Minnesota.
Okay,
or close. I don't know. I grew up in
1st and 10. There you go. That's the all.
I definitely think it's a downgrade, but here's why I think it's a downgrade. Because of the position versatility he has to play inside linebacker and outside linebacker. I don't think Shaq Barrett has that. And he's a younger player. Shaq is 32.
Okay, but here's the thing. Because they replaced Baker with not one but two guys, I don't think the need to have that position flexibility is as big as it was last year when they were short on inside linebackers.
That's fair. I still think it's a downgrade. No, nothing personal.
Oh, I agree.
Then we get to nose tackle Raekwon Davis, who signed a 2-year, $14 million deal, which is basically just a 1-year, $7 million deal because it's guaranteed. That's what was guaranteed by the Colts. He's going to potentially be replaced by Benito Jones, who I know you feel uncomfortable that I named him a nose tackle. But I believe that's what he played in college, and I believe that's what he played earlier in his stint with the Miami Dolphins. Not to say that the Dolphins use a traditional nose tackle anyway, because I would struggle to name Raekwon Davis a nose tackle.
Correct. But if we look at what Baltimore did, and again, this is the great mystery. We don't know exactly if the Dolphins are going to run what the Ravens ran last year, but they had like monsters in the middle of that defensive line with like Michael Pierce and Jones, who were like both like 350, 360. Benito Jones is listed as 6'1", 335, which is much bigger than when he was with the Dolphins originally.
Mm-hmm.
Again, he was okay in Detroit last year. If you're talking about that defensive line, it's Hutchinson on the outside and Salim McNeil in the interior of the defense. It wasn't Benito Jones, and they felt they needed to upgrade because they didn't even extend him a qualifying offer as a restricted free agent that would have cost them only $2.8 million. And
only $2.8 million. That's a lot of money for the Dolphins.
Yeah, but it wasn't for the Lions, who had some cap flexibility, and they were a game away from getting to the Super Bowl last year. So if they really thought highly of him, they would have made it work to bring him back. So
they replaced him with DJ Reader. So
who's a very, very, very good veteran.
So we're both saying downgrade there. Is that what we're saying?
Downgrade, understanding that Raekwon wasn't necessarily a high impact player.
Okay. This is a splitting hairs situation because I'm including Emmanuel Ogbah. This isn't just players that are free agents that left, but players that were released, and Emmanuel Ogbah was released to clear cap space. Linebacker, defensive lineman Deshaun Hand was re-signed. Hand sparingly contributed last year, 27 tackles, one sack. He did, however, play more defensive snaps than Emmanuel Ogbah, who contributed 5 sacks and 1 interception. He played 198 defensive snaps. Are you looking at that as an upgrade, downgrade, push? Where are you at on this one?
Well, to me, they're kind of different positions. So no, I don't necessarily think it's apples and apples here. Ogbah's an edge guy, and Deshaun Hand is more of an inside guy. Deshaun Hand is part of the discussion in terms of replacing Christian Wilkins. And to me, he'd be one of the leading candidates to get the most snaps along probably maybe with Jones.
Okay.
That's where I see them.
All right. Not even but Jonathan Harris?
No.
Okay. We got a lot of names, a lot of bodies. The question is, can any of them be players? But this is basically just the Dolphins saying that, hey, we don't prioritize that position that much in terms of compensation. Now let's get to one position which I have no doubt in my mind is a clear upgrade. I don't even need you to say it, but the tight end position, they keep Durham Smythe, they keep Julian Hill. Obviously, the replacement is Tyler Croft, being replaced by Jonnu Smith and then Jody Fortson, who I think you can factor in as kind of more of a tight end wide receiver type. And then Jonnu Smith is more of an H-back, Charles Clay-esque, second tight end, and maybe a starter if he can learn the playbook pretty quickly. Upgrade, I'm sure, from your standpoint, correct?
Yeah, the shaking my head was no. I don't think he's going to be a starter. I think Durham Smythe's going to be starting. When they could go two tight end at times, they will go two tight end at times because they
play two tight ends.
Their alignment offensively. So my guess is Jonnu Smith's going to have starts. I'm going to guess Durham Smythe's going to have more starts. But no, that obviously, I mean, duh. I mean, in fact, so it's not a complete duh. I would say that that's the position where they have upgraded the most.
Absolutely, no question about it. Let's move on to the wide receiver unit, which is one position that I think is being overlooked because it's in clear need of an upgrade. When Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle were both limping around at the end of the season, in my opinion, while Cedric Wilson stepped up, nobody stepped up. And Cedric Wilson left and signed for a deal with the New Orleans Saints. Good luck to him. But the Dolphins, the only receiver that they've signed so far is Braxton Berrios. They re-signed him to a one-year deal that could be worth up to $3 million. Braxton was a primary returner and probably the number one slot receiver, if you can really consider him like the number one slot receiver. Upgrade, downgrade, status quo, what do you think?
Well, again, if the pure comparison is Cedric Wilson or Braxton Berrios as your third receiving option, it's close to it's a wash pretty much. But they're going to add other players there. And I say it's a wash because I think Berrios was more dependable maybe, and then Cedric made a couple of really tough catches. He had a couple like really nice catches down the sidelines. But I don't think there's a major difference there. But they're going to add some players, and I keep hearing like the name of Michael Thomas being thrown out. Again, whoever else they bring in is going to a lot of it's going to depend on who they can get at a fairly reasonable rate.
Hey man, they got all this cap space now.
I like Hunter Renfrow. You don't, because you want toughness on the team that's still going to be a finesse team, no matter who they could bring in. The toughest player in the history of the NFL, they'll still be a finesse team, so it doesn't matter. And Hunter Renfrow is very, very tough. He's just not big. So to me, he would be fine. If you want more size, I'm looking at the free agent list right now. There's not a ton of names that are particularly exciting anymore, to be honest with you. Odell Beckham Jr. doesn't do anything for me. Tyler Boyd would be a great third receiver, but how much are the Dolphins actually?
I am surprised that his market has been so flat, considering he was a pretty productive receiver. Mm-hmm. But hey, and Cincinnati, I guess, hasn't. Who knows? Maybe the Dolphins are in play. I don't know. I have no idea. Yeah, let's get to our next position.
What's your verdict, Berrios versus Wilson?
Upgrade. Okay. Because Berrios can give you, as a number 4 or 5 receiver, Berrios can give you returning. Whereas Cedric Wilson, well, I guess he did do returning.
He did. 50-yard punt return in the playoffs.
Oh my gosh.
2 years ago. Dude, and Berrios, while he was very consistent, dependable, did not have a return longer than 35 yards.
I'm still saying it's an upgrade. I respect what Cedric Wilson did. He resurrected his career at the end of the season, but I'm not going to pretend like I didn't think that guy was mediocre at best during training camp for 2 years.
That's the nicest thing you've ever said about him.
Let's get to the safety position. This, I think, is probably one of the more controversial and maybe on the fence, or maybe it's not. Deshaun Elliott and Brandon Jones, they both left. Elliott signed, I believe, a deal with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I can't remember what the contract terms were. And Brandon Jones got a 3-year, $20 million deal with the Denver Broncos. $11 million of it was guaranteed. No disrespect to Brandon Jones, but
there's about to be disrespect.
I was like, "What are you doing, Sean Payton?" Maybe I hope I'm wrong, and maybe Brandon Jones becomes the best blitzing safety in the NFL. But That to me was the overpaid special of the entire offseason. $11 million to Brandon Jones. Are you kidding me? But he was replaced with Jordan Poyer, and they were replaced with Jordan Poyer and the re-signing of Elijah Campbell, who has been a core special teams player throughout his career. Jordan Poyer obviously got a one-year deal for, I believe it was $2 million. He started 117 NFL games in his 14 seasons. He's 32 years old. He's got plenty to prove. He might have lost a step, and maybe that's what he's out here to prove, that he hasn't lost a step. Where do you consider that safety spot? Upgrade, downgrade?
Yeah, can you ask me in December?
No, sir.
No.
You must have a conviction now.
I love how you go like no disrespect before you're about to diss somebody. That's awesome. I do that too. When you preface something with all due respect, that's bad. So what's coming up?
Yeah.
Obviously, the big question here is, how much does Jordan Poyer have left? And obviously, when he's doing a Zoom media session, he's going to say all the right things and all that. Clearly, he wasn't the same guy in 2023 that he was in, 2019, 20, 21, 22, all those years. Mm-hmm. And was it a blip? Was it the start of, a decline that's not coming back? I know you were not a Deshaun Elliott fan, but he was a bit of a thumper in the secondary. Brandon Jones also was a thumper in the secondary, even though sometimes he was nailing his own players, i.e. Jerome Baker and Xavier Howard. But they weren't necessarily what I would say great in coverage. And I agree with you about Brandon Jones' contract. Dude, more salute. But man, that's a tough call right now because I don't know exactly what Jordan Poyer.
I am going with an upgrade. This is going to shock you. You know why I'm going with an upgrade? Because
you're a half glass full all the time. You're Mr. Sunshine, Mr. Positivity. That's why. And I'm just this big nasty hater. That's why.
I'm sure Dolphin fans would disagree with you. The reason why I'm going with an upgrade is because I wanted the Dolphins to sign Jordan Poyer last offseason. I think that he is a very impactful player. Yes, it does concern me that he's 32 and he's played 11 seasons already. This is going to be his 12th season. I've seen him train, and I've seen him train recently, probably 2 years ago. That's not really recently. But he's got the dog in him. I know dog. I smell dog. I can hear a dog bark. And I love players with the dog. So I'm definitely going to upgrade.
Okay. And while you were talking, something popped into my head that's going to make me go upgrade. And here's the reason. Okay. And I'm not going to say anything that anybody who covers the Dolphins would disagree with, even though I don't know how many people would be comfortable with throwing it out there. But I think there's some maturity issues when we're dealing with Jevon Holland, who does have a lot of talent. And I think Jordan Poyer, with his professionalism, his experience, could be a very, very good influence on Jevon Holland.
Are you calling Jevon Holland immature?
Is that what I did?
All righty then.
Where's the lie?
I don't know. Let's move on to cornerback.
So I think because of what Jordan Poyer could do for Jevon Holland, I think they're.
What are you talking about? Jevon Holland's the smartest guy in the room, man. Let's move on.
Whoa! You don't throw that out there and move on. By all means, please explain.
I would agree with you. There are some maturity issues there.
Thank you. I mean, it's not something like necessarily pleasant to throw out there, but those are the facts. I mean, anyway, let's move on.
We were at cornerback, and this is a very
I know because it involves somebody that you're kind of fond of. So that
what is this? I'm fond. Everybody's like, I'm fond of this guy.
You're about to say it. Go ahead.
With over the years, they move on. I don't get attached. Like I don't like this whole buddy thing. 27 interceptions over from the duration of his starting of his career, more than everybody in the NFL. Who else got more interceptions than Xavier Howard? And
yeah, the only problem with that is that that was mostly accumulated between 2016 or 2017 and 2021. The
was he
last
good
2 years,
last year? Was he good last year when healthy or not? Yeah or nay?
he was solid. He wasn't prime X.
Okay. Was he answer the question? Was he good or not?
Yeah, he was good.
Okay. When healthy. Now the question
When-
is
Correct.
how much can we count on him to be healthy? What Kendall Fuller has on Xavier Howard is durability and probably a little bit more scheme diverse because he's probably better as a zone coverage guy. And I suspect that Anthony Weaver is going to be Anthony Weaver is going to be playing a lot more zone. But I'm sorry, they came out in the same draft. Kendall, tell me how many Pro Bowls Kendall Fuller's made. They're relatively the same age.
Again, here the problem that I have with you right now is all you keep doing. X is going to be 31 on 4th of July.
Mm-hmm.
Kendall Fuller
is
even though he's
29.
He just turned 29 last month. So there's a 2-year difference, even though they came out of the same draft class. And the problem is you keep talking about X, about prime X. And the problem is that the last 2 years, the issues have been the injuries have been a problem, and they're like soft core injuries. It's hammies and groins basically, and he's not getting any younger. And then we're not even mentioning the fact that they're getting Kendall Fuller for $8 million as opposed to X's cap number, which was 25.
I mean, we're not bringing up the money because
we're never. You're right. Okay, my bad. We're not bringing up the money.
It's just whether it's an upgrade or it's a downgrade. And I'm sorry, and I feel bad that people think that I'm not pro Kendall Fuller. I'm not anti Kendall Fuller. Is he better than everybody else on the Dolphins roster except for Jalen Ramsey? Absolutely. But I'm sorry. If you're telling me who's going to have a better season if they're both staying healthy, I'm going to go with Xavier Howard based on the body of work, the track record, and the fact that he's still got plenty of proof. And no disrespect to Kendall Fuller, but if he was a better player, you would have got a better deal from the Miami Dolphins or others out there. And he didn't. It's basically a 1-year deal.
And that's fair. My counter would be if the Dolphins are going to be heavy zone, I think Kendall Fuller's an upgrade. If they're going to be heavy man, I think X would have been the better play.
Yes, and I believe they will be heavy zone. So you're right.
Then I think Kendall Fuller's a better play. And then particularly since you can move him around more than you could with X.
So on March 15th, his 2025 season becomes guaranteed for injury fully, his base salary. But ultimately, it's a 1-year deal. It's people are like, oh man, they got such a great stud of a free agent. I'm sorry, it's not a great contract. Basically, $8 million of it is guaranteed. So he's a 1-year, $8 million deal, which is fine. There's no shame in that. That's a lot of money, and I think it's what you pay an NFL starter. So it shows they clearly view him as an NFL starter. Do I know what Xavier Howard's going to get out there on the market? No, I don't. I also know that Xavier is going to be cherry picking teams. He was on the OG podcast with Udonis Haslam and Mike Miller. And he basically said, I want to play for a title contender, and I've told my agent that I'll take less to do that. So he's out here chasing a ring. So we'll see how that ends up.
Yeah, 2 factors we need to mention with X for those interested in his next move is number one, he's still dealing with the foot issue. Because remember when the Dolphins released him, it was with failed physical. And then number two, X can say what he wants from his standpoint. The other question is exactly how many teams are going to be calling his agent.
I think he's gotten significant interest.
Okay.
I just don't think people are ready to see if I don't think he can pass a physical right now. And this is just a guess, not telling you one way or the other, but we'll see how that plays out. I think we got a little bit of time. Primarily, I think X is probably a guy who might sign after the draft. And let's move on to our next position, which is still cornerback. Eli Apple. The replacement is potentially Nick Needham. I'm going to go with a downgrade, even though I've ragged on Eli Apple for the entire season. And he did allow 43 of the 66 passes thrown at him to be completed. I don't think what we saw from Nick Needham last year shows that he's ready to challenge for a starting spot. Obviously, Nick should be healthier this season and hopefully in better shape, but that's not an upgrade to me.
Except again, I'm going to accuse you of appling and oranging. No, of Eli. It's a case of Eli apples and oranges. There you go.
Right. I was like, what?
I don't see, and I don't necessarily want the Dolphins to be using Nick Needham outside. I think Nick Needham's spot is in the slot, and I've said this before. I'm going to say it again. Have Nick Needham and Cater Co, who compete for the nickel for the slot corner position. Let the best man win, and then fill out the rest of your secondary with other players. If you go to dime, maybe you whoever loses that spot can battle for that dime position. But I don't know that it's an equal matchup there.
And then let's get to our final position, which is the swing tackle spot. Kendall Lamb, who remains an unsigned free agent. You've got offensive tackle Jake Driscoll, and I know you consider him more of a guard.
Why are you rolling your eyes when you say that?
Because I don't.
Okay,
I consider him a right side swing player where he could play guard and tackle. Could he compete for the starting right guard spot? Sure. Could he be Austin Jackson's primary replacement and maybe swing out there to left tackle, which I think is a little bit more important a position? Absolutely. I think this is a downgrade just because I'm a big Kendall Lamb fan. I thought Kendall Lamb played so admirable last year. It hurts my heart that he probably won't be back here and maybe moving on from the NFL. But I understand if it's not in your heart, this isn't something that you want to do, especially if your focus isn't there. Or maybe he signs later on in the process because, the NFL is always looking for good offensive linemen. Always. It never ends. But right now, Jake Driscoll, downgrade to me.
I agree. I don't even think there's an explanation that just Kendall Lamb's a better player than Jack Driscoll.
Mm-hmm.
Pure and simple. But I do think he's going to be in the mix to start at right guard. I absolutely do think, and I believe from everything I have heard in my reports, better at guard than tackle.
Interesting. So we will see. We'll be able to see a lot of that when they do start the OTAs. Next week is the NFL owners meetings where we'll have Mike McDaniel and Chris Greer justify themselves on this roster rebuild. As you saw based on our breakdown, there were a lot of downgrades. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be a worse or inferior team, but a lot of the talent. I think you upgraded at linebacker, inside linebacker, and you upgraded at tight end, but just about every other spot took some L's.
But we knew that was going to happen, and again, this is part of whether you want to call it apocalypse or not. This is part of the thing of the Dolphins being in a tough cap situation. They also had a couple of their free agents who got bigger deals than expected. For all we know, maybe the Dolphins wanted to bring back Brandon Jones, and they saw the offer he got from Denver, and they were like, "Good luck to you, Brandon."
Yeah, that's probably a lot of their free agents. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out, but we will be here, alldolphins.com. You know how to find us, alldolphins.com. Just type it into your browser. You can find the content, the stories, the breakdowns, the analysis, and then you know how to find the podcast. We're on every audio platform that you can look for, and we primarily like when you watch it on YouTube. So on that note, we will see you tomorrow. We've got Antoine Staley coming up to give us an AFC East wrap about the offseason and free agency. On that note, we are out.